In this video, I will be sharing with you how to make a notched collar jacket as seen in this video, a double-breasted notched collar jacket. But before I go ahead, I just want to say thank you to all my subscribers. If it's your first time here, welcome. Please make sure you subscribe and turn on your post notification bell so that you get notified anytime I post a new video. And I also want to say thank you guys for getting me to 1000 subscribers. It means a whole lot to me. So without wasting so much time, let's get right into the video. So the first thing I have here on my pattern paper is my lines, my body measurements, my shoulder line, my chest line, my bust line, my waistline, and my hip line. So my paper is not long enough, so I'll be adding to my full length while cutting on my fabric. But if you have a paper that is long enough, just make sure you cut your exact full length measurements and add some inches below. So now I'm drafting the back pattern first before I draft the front. And the first thing I'm going to do here is to go to my waist point, my waistline, and mark 0.75 inches and connect that line to the chest line and to the hip line. So this is because the back of our bodies has a curve, and if it were a zip, I would be doing this for the zip bulge, but here it's just to take away that bulge that you usually have at the middle of the back. So once that is done, I'll mark my shoulder measurements divided by 2, and whatever I have there, I'll be adding 1 inch because I need this blazer to be free. I'll also mark what I have there at the chest line, and I'll connect the lines together. Next thing I'm going to do is to take my round neck measurement, and for the width I'm using 3 inches. Then for the depth I'm making use of 1 inch because this is the back of this blazer and we do not need a very deep neckline. So after doing that, I'm going to connect that with my curved ruler. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to go down by 1 inch at the shoulder line for to get my shoulder slant. Then I'll connect that to the neckline. Please take note, I later adjusted my neck width to 3.5 inches. So I'll also mark my round chest measurement, my round bust measurement divided by 4, and mark it at that point. I'll mark the midpoint from that shoulder slant to the chest line, and then I'll connect it with the curved ruler to get my armhole for the back. So after doing that, I'm going to highlight all this with a marker so that everything is clear and easy to follow. I'll connect that and highlight everything with the marker so that you can see what we have been doing. Then I'll also extend my shoulder line by 1/2 inch. This is an allowance, so that by the time I join my shoulders, I'll not be losing my actual allowances. So I'll connect my armhole and connect the neckline, connect it to the new 1/2 inch that's above the shoulder line, because they will be cut out together. I'll go ahead and mark my bust band measurement on my chest line, my bust line, my waist, and my hip so that I can take in my darts. So after doing this, I'm going to draw a straight line and connect that line together. So I actually did not record the part where I took in the darts. On the waistline, I went in by 1/2 inch and I connected that to the bust line. So actually I went down by 1 inch and I went above by 1 inch at the bust line, just as you would normally do when drafting a princess dart bustier for the back. So there's no bust at the back, so you don't need to take a lot of allowances. And now I'm just trying to get the midpoint of this armhole from the original shoulder line. Please do not start from the 1/2 inch we added for the allowance. So after taking that point, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch on both sides, and then I'm going to connect it to that 1 inch above the bust line, as you can see in the video. So I'm going to connect the 2 lines together to get my dart at the armhole area. So after doing that, I'm just going to blend that in to connect with the lower dart. And don't forget, whenever you take allowances at the armhole, always replace it. So 1/2 inch on both sides is going to be equal to 1 inch. So I have to extend my armhole by, I have to extend that point by 1 inch and connect it to the chest measurement. So this right here is going to be the new chest line. While I am cutting, I'll be cutting out on this new line. And now moving on, I would be highlighting. I would use my marker to highlight everything I have done so far so that it is easy to follow and understand. And at the bust area, I'm just going to smoothen that curve so that it doesn't have a sharp pointy edge. Then the dart, I'm going to highlight it so that you can see what it looks like. Then I'll go ahead and mark all my round measurements divided by 4. I'll mark my bust measurement divided by 4 and I'll mark it at that point. I'll divide my waist, round waist measurement divided by 4 and mark it on that point. I'll also take the dart intake and I'll add it at that point there. So apart from the dart intake, I'll also mark the bulge area, that's the waist point where I took half of 0.75 inches, and I'm going to add it to the measurement. Then I'll head over to the hip line. I'll mark my hip measurement, round hip divided by 4, and I'll mark it there. So if you would like your blazer to be a little bit free, it is advisable you add 1 inch to all your round measurements. So if you do not want it to be free, you can leave it at the exact measurement, but it's mostly advisable that you add some allowance so that your jacket at the bottom free line, that's the full length measurement, just mark your hip, round hip measurement divided by 4, because it's going to get to the hip point. I added 1 inch for my sewing allowance and I'm connecting the lines right now, and I'm going to cut this out. So watch how I'm going to cut this out. I'm cutting out at the dart area and I'm going to cut out the armhole. So my paper cuts into 2 and I'm going to attach it with my tape. So I'll cut out this part like this and get my armhole area. I'll also cut out the center part like this, following all the lines and that has been made. And that's just all for the back pattern. So for the front piece, I placed the back part and I transferred all the lines to a new pattern paper like this, and I labeled it front pattern. So all the lines should look the same, just as the back, just like the back. So another thing to take note of is the fact that you should leave at least 7 inches at the top and about 8 inches, 7 to 8 inches at the top and at the side of your pattern before transferring the measurements. And now I'm just trying to extend the lines, the chest line, the bust line, the hip line and the shoulder line on this new pattern paper. I'm also going to label them just like I did for the back pattern before I start taking my measurements. So for the neck width here, I use the same neck width for the back, but the depth is deeper, so I use 3 inches depth for the neckline here. So I'll go ahead and mark my round bust measurement divided by 4 so that I can get my armhole, and then I'll bring down what I have on the shoulder line on that chest line and mark it like this. So after doing that, I'm going to get the midpoint of this line and go in by 1/2 inch. Then I'll connect the 3 points together to get my armhole for the front bodice. I'll also mark my round bust measurements on the bust line I'll go to the waistline and I would mark my round waist measurement, also divided by 4 on that line. Then on the hip line, I'll also mark my round hip measurement divided by 4, and on the full length I'll drop whatever I have on the hip line on the full length line. So moving on, I'm gonna add 1 inch if I want. Like, since I added 1 inch to the back bodice, I'm going to add that same 1 inch here for ease. So take note that 1 inch is not the sewing allowance. This is for the ease, because this is a blazer, this is a jacket, so you can do that. So I went up by 1 inch at the hip line and I connected my bust span line like this to the bust point like this. So I marked my bust span measurement just as I did at the back pattern, and I connected the lines. So I'm going to go down also at the bust line. I'll go down by 1 inch, and then I'm going to take my darts for the front pattern. So since we have a bust at the front pattern, at the front part of our body, I'm going to take 1 inch on both sides at the waist like this. I'll take 1 inch and 1 inch on the other side of the line. So after doing that, I'm just going to take my ruler and I'll connect this 1 inch point to the mark I made under the bust line, and I'll connect that also to the 1 inch above the hip line like this. I'll also do that on the other part where I took 1 inch. I'll connect it like this, and that is going to be our lower dart. I'll do the same thing I did at the back part. I'll go to the armhole and I will get my darts. I'll measure and get the midpoint of my armhole, and at that midpoint mark I'm going to take half of an inch on both sides. I'll make a mark at that midpoint, then I'll mark half of an inch on both sides, and then I'm going to connect it to that 1 inch I took above the bust line like this. So after connecting these lines, you always remember to replace whatever inches you've taken at the armhole so that it doesn't become shorter after sewing. So half of an inch at both sides gives 1 inch, so I'm extending the armhole by 1 inch. Then I'm going to smoothen the bust area so that there are no sharp edges like this. And with that, the next thing I need to do is decide where I want my break point to be at, and I'll extend the line at the waist point. You can decide to make yours higher even at the under bust or at the bust area. So this marks the overlap, also known as why this jacket is called a double-breasted jacket. So I'm extending my lines by 4 inches. You can use 5 inches or even 3.5. Depends on how big or how much you want the overlap to be. And after doing that, I'm going to come over to the neckline and I'm going to mark 1/4 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch like this. The reason why I'm marking this is to ensure that my jacket, the collar, sits properly on the neck when it is sewn. So I'm going to connect that line like this straight up to meet that point I just made like this. So it's very important you do this so that your collar sits properly. Then after doing that, I'm going to decide how much lapel, like how wide I would like my lapel to look. So I'm going to make use of 3 inches from the original neckline, and I'll extend that line like this. So 2.5 to 3 inches is okay for a standard lapel. And after doing that, all I need to do is to measure from my back pattern the neckline at the back pattern like this. So you really want to take your time while doing this. Make sure you're not taking the half of an inch allowance on the shoulder. So you can do this 2 times just to cross check and be sure that you are taking the exact neck measurement. And I'm going to extend the line at that point like this, following that slant line. So This is the reason why you should draft your back pattern before drafting the front, because you need the measurements. So at that point where I marked, I'm going to go in again by 0.75 inches and I would draw out the new line I'll be working with. So this is also another measure to take so that your lapel, your collar sits properly. And now I'm just going to confirm that I have the same inches, like the same measurements, after shifting the line. And at that point, I'm also going to decide how big I want my collar to be. Make sure you're not putting your tape straight up like that. You should give it a slant that looks like this. So just mark that point, and in my case I'm using 4 inches. So I'm just going to connect that line like this, following that slant. As you can see, that line is not straight, so make sure yours is looking that way. And now I'm going to connect to that point where we extended our blazer to get the overlap. And to get the notch collar effect, I'm just going to go in by about 1 inch from the lapel in like this, and then at the edge of the lapel I'm gonna go up by 1 inch and connect it like this. I'm really sorry, I did not know my camera was not recording this part, but by the time I'm done, I'm sure you understand what I did here. Well, I changed my mind and I decided to customize this to the exact way I would like it to be. So you can just play around with this and decide how you would like your notch to look. So after doing this, all you need to do finally is to connect that line together at that top part, and this is the collar, and that point is going to be on fold. So I'm just going to label it that way so that I don't get confused after cutting this out. And now this is the lapel, and finally I'm just going to label the part where I'll be cutting out. So this part is going to be cut out like this, that part also will be cut out. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to replace all my darts I have taken on this pattern. So I'll replace that dart there, what I have on the under bust, on that waistline. Then I would also mark what I have on that line above the bust, the chest line. I'm going to replace everything, as well as add 1 inch for sewing allowance, because I added 1 inch at the back. So I'm going to replace that. Then I'll also add 1 inch for ease. So I'm going to mark everything and then I'll connect this. So regardless of the shape I have at the waist point, I will always say this: make sure you just connect it exactly like the way it looks. So I'm extending my armhole by that 1 inch and I'm drawing a new armhole now. So this is where I'm going to be cutting my armhole when I cut out this pattern. So don't forget to add your 1/2 inch sewing allowance at the top of your shoulder. This is very important so that you do not take out of your original allowance. And after doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and cut out this pattern. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video to the end. Don't forget to like this video, and if you are yet subscribed, please make sure you hit on that subscribe button. It's absolutely free to subscribe, and turn on your notification bell so that you get notified anytime a video comes up on this channel. Thank you so much, and bye.